We're live.
Hey, we're live. Well, welcome to Pitch Perfect, and we're really glad you're here. We're excited to be part of NunPub 3, and we just want to encourage you to feel free to join in the comments, leave any questions you might have while we talk about pitching. Before we get into that, though, I'm going to have each of our wonderful panelists share a little bit about themselves, introduce themselves, and so I'll have us start with Fertessa.
Hello, I am Fertessa Elise, and I am a games producer for Funko Games. Today, I will be speaking on my experience as an indie designer. I've designed Book of Villainy, Wicked and Wise, and co-designed Mansplaining. So, thank you.
Awesome. I am Sarah Fure. I am in charge of inventor relations for Goliath Games around the globe. I have been here for almost 10 years, and it is my favorite part of the job because every day is different.
Hi, I'm Isaac Shalev, and I'm a game designer and author of books about game design, and been doing this for, I guess, about the last 8 years. You might know me for Saikatsu or for Building Blocks of Tabletop Game Design, which I co-authored with Jeff Engelstein. And I think, Daryl, you and I go back about that same time, so thanks for having me on.
Hi, I am Erica Weirs. I'm also a game designer. Was freelance for a long time, but actually just went full time. Moving over to Spin as a staff designer now. So yeah. But yeah, I've been doing the freelance thing for I think about 5 to 6 years now. And so I guess the most recent games people might know me for is Scott Pilgrim Miniatures the World, Steven Universe, Battling Palooza, and then we have got Rat Queens to the Slaughter coming to Kickstarter in I think like a month and a half or something.
Very cool. And I'm Matthew Johnston. I am an Australian independent board game designer, although I live in the Czech Republic, although currently in England. It's complicated. Yeah, I should have thought of that first. I've been designing games for about the last 10 years, had over 25 games released, things like Monumental, Elysium, the adventure games with Cosmos, had a few vivid memories on Kickstarter recently. And in terms of pitching, I've been going to Essen for the last 10 years, although of course not directly recently, and probably have pitched, I don't know, at least 250, 300 times, I'd say, across conventions. So yeah, awesome. Looking forward to chat.
Yeah, wonderful. And I guess I never actually introduced myself. My name's Daryl Andrews. I'm a freelance game designer, and I'm just excited that some friends here came to join this conversation. And I'm going to bounce a bunch of questions off them and see, we can learn together from all the different experiences that each of us has had. So I'm going to start us off with reminiscing, trying to dial back to the very first time you ever either pitched yourself or you heard a pitch. Think about that experience and then kind of share it. How did it go? Obviously, maybe not your best pitch to start, but tell us a little bit about that experience. And why don't I'll put on the spot Erica.
Oh, of course. No, I'm just kidding. He just knows because I can talk forever about absolutely nothing. You know what's funny? This was a weird one to think back on because I was like, was the first one a game or games? So it actually took me a while to figure out what the first game pitch was. I actually think it might have been, Gerald, do you remember in the Day in the Village where it was like the tile flipping game where it was actually all sequential?
Yep.
I think that might have been like my very first pitched game. But to be honest, it took me a long time to remember that one. I think my first pitch games would have actually been co-designing with Daryl, running around with a suitcase of about, I think I came up with 4 games. It was our first pitches. I think it was Roar, Upside Down, Ink Monsters, and Itachi. And it's really funny to think where all of those have sort of ended up. So it was like 2 card games, a set collecting dexterity game, and a sort of like worker placement Risk with Lions. But that was all at once because I didn't really start small.
Awesome. Well, let's keep the conversation going. Sarah, do you want to tell us a little bit about your first experience?
So my first experience of getting pitched to, first of all, I didn't know that this side of the industry even existed when I started. So listening to people pitch and realizing that that's what they did either for a living or that they were creative enough to do this on the side was fantastic. But one of the first ones I was pitched was a game that was actually already on the market, and someone was pitching me the exact same game with the exact same theme, and I thought I was being punked. Like, I thought my boss was testing me. They were not. And so that knowing the market and knowing if the theme is out there already with the same gameplay is super important before you pitched.
Awesome. Well, I mean, let's go with one more of these, and then I'm going to jump into our next question. But Matthew, why don't you share your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I have two experiences. It's funny, actually. My very first game to be published, I actually never pitched. It was pitched on behalf of me without me even knowing, actually. So I think I caught a bit of a break there, and then just got a nice email from the publisher a few weeks after Essen saying they'd like to publish my game, even though I'd never shown it to them. But the actual first pitch, Brett Gilbert and myself, we made a co-design Essen 2012. It was just a simple kind of worker, I don't even remember what it was. It was like a worker placement movement thing around Venice. And we showed that one game to probably like 10 publishers. And that was the only one game we had. It's sort of funny to think how later on, a bit like Erica's story about walking around with suitcase of prototypes, but it all started with just this one game that we would just show to anybody who would take a meeting with us. And the first one I think was AEG, actually. And they were lovely. And it's nice that I keep meeting with them now and we keep pitching. So, we'll probably get onto that, I guess, but pitching it's not just about the games, it's about also like forming really great relationships with publishers and people, which is a great part of it.
I love it, Matthew. You're transitioning perfectly to our next question. So, Isaac, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, and we'll bounce around to a few people. And I'm curious, people are wondering, who do you pitch? Like, what different companies have you pitched to, and how did you kind of like get to reach out to them? Maybe contacts where, or email or whatnot. Isaac, why don't you share a little bit about some of the publishers that you've pitched, and then I'll put on deck for Tessa. You'll be next, and you can share a few examples as well after Isaac.
Yeah, thank you. I've really pitched to a lot of different companies, both in the hobby space and in mass market. I used to live in New York City, and so in addition to attending some of the traditional cons like Gen Con, I also went to New York Toy Fair, and so there are a lot more companies that we don't necessarily know about or think about as part of the hobby gaming industry that I was exposed to much earlier on. So my first experience pitching was, I think it was Gen Con 2014, and it was the first speed dating that had been done at Gen Con, and so I got to pitch to 20 or so companies, and some of them were tiny companies and some of them were, large and established publishers. So because of that, I kind of became known to those companies. AEG saw me pitch, and so when the next time I had an opportunity, they welcomed me coming back again. There were a lot more open opportunities to pitch back then, and I also got to go to Essen. So I've pitched, Cosmos and Hutter, Huchenfriends, or some of the large European companies that haven't come over to the U.S. as much. So it's really been a broad range. And the one thing I'd say to folks listening who are thinking about how do I get those kinds of appointments is that it doesn't look the same today as it did 8 years ago. And the pre-work, the outreach that you do via email, the preparation that you show, so that a publisher who looks at you, says, "Oh, this is worth a spot of my time," is going to pay off a lot. It's not quite as easy as it used to be of just sort of walking up to a booth and trying to make an appointment, which used to really work.
Great examples, Isaac. And I'm going to pass it, like I mentioned, to Tessa. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experiences, some of the people you pitched before you got scooped up by Funko?
Yeah, sure. So with my first game, that is the game that I was able to kind of pitch around the most, Book of Villainy. And I didn't have any contacts in the industry at all. And I was still relatively new to the hobby. So my biggest introduction into pitching was through contests and through the publisher speed dating events. So AEG, for example, had a contest where they were looking for female designers, diverse designers. So I reached out to that, and I was able to pitch pretty well there. And then I was also able to do the publisher speed dating at 2 different conventions, which is where I hooked up with Gold Seal Games, but I also ran across Julie at Greenbrier, and I also was put in front of Smirk and Dagger. So there were quite a few companies at both events, and that got me the exposure, similar to what Isaac was saying, where companies were familiar with me pitching, and I was finally able to start making connections. And as far as my other games, I participated in something similar, such as like the Shark Tank events. Wise Wizard Games, they did a Shark Tank pitching event, kind of simulation, and it was the same where you had about 2 minutes to pitch your game, and just putting myself there got me introductions to publishers, where I was able to kind of sit down and do a play test and pitch informally that way. And speaking of informally pitching, that's how I got my second game signed, Wicked and Wise, because that was also just kind of a sit down and play test with a publisher friend, and then there was an offer to sign the game. So that kind of informal pitching exists as well.
That's awesome. Great examples. I don't know, Fortessa, if you ever knew this, but the first time I actually ever heard about you as a designer was from Julie Ahern, just bragging about how wonderful it was hearing your pitch. So a great example of just, building relationships, like, Matthew was saying before. It's all about that. And I'm curious, and I'm going to set Erica up again for this one, put her on the spot to warm us up. But share about like your favorite pitch or an experience that kind of stood out, and what made that a positive experience. Because there's obviously room for us all to kind of figure this out. And, it's a hard target to do well. So maybe hearing an example of like a really positive experience can help kind of everyone involved in the pitching process. So why don't you share one of kind of your highlight moments?
Sure. I have a person I'm going to highlight for sure, but I'm going to get into like why I'm going to highlight them really quick, because the more you pitch, the more you start to, it's like anything else, you start to kind of figure out the rules of, I'll say rules of engagement is the best way to put it. So what I've noticed is to have a really good relationship with a publisher and have successful pitching, at least ones that I feel good about, because we'll talk about kind of later about what can kind of make a pitch feel really weird or wrong. But for the most part, if the person really understands their company, really understands their brands, or at least has a very clear direction, you kind of instantly know where you stand with them. They're like, this is great for this doesn't work for us. Even people who would be like, I recommend you go run this across to the booth over there because that's their jam. Like, when people know what they're talking about, it just makes everything such a better experience. It's so much more direct. You have less waiting. You have way less misunderstandings. Like, our hopes get, dashed and raised so often in game design. And so this is one of the ways to kind of curb that a little bit too, because there's none of this, oh, but they took it, they might like it, this person already understands this is not going to work. And in fact, this person's doing a huge favor by already understanding this is not going to work, because you don't have to go through any of that. And so an awesome person at this, if you ever get a chance, is Greg from Asmodee. What is Greg's last name again?
Benassar.
Thank you. Benassar. I've never met somebody who can blast through brands as fast as he can and know exactly what he's talking about. So Asmodee, most people, refer to it as the gelatinous cube of gaming, because it just absorbs companies. Now, to be able to understand what each of those individual brands need under that umbrella, that is an amazing ability. And he can be like, this works for this one, this works for like Space Cowboys, this works for this brand, that doesn't apply to anything we're doing, this has a possibility. You want that, right? Because you don't go through kind of the rest of the crap when that happens.
Awesome. Perfect example. I've been in some of those meetings, so I appreciate Greg's ability to see quickly and be brutally honest. So, yes. Matt, do you want to go next with an example or a story of a good pitching experience and why that was?
It's sort of a connected over several times. It's a little bit in contrast to what Erica was saying, because I want to talk about with Cosmos that I've met an editor there called Wolfgang Lütke. He sort of worked for Cosmos for many decades, and I'm seeing some nods, so I'm guessing some of the other panelists have met with Wolfgang. One of the first contacts I had at Essen, And I think the thing that makes that experience so positive is sort of twofold. One is that I think it really underlines this point about relationship building. He's very direct in that, if you show him something he's not interested, he will just tell you. But at the same time, Cosmos didn't sign anything of mine for many, many years until we did eventually sign something. But he has this sense of trust in that relationship that he will really encourage you to show anything to him, and to have that kind of safe space in a way, or he doesn't mind you showing something that you think is not going to be a fit for him, because he just wants to see it, because obviously sometimes the publisher has something going on that you don't know about. And sometimes you can second guess yourself. So the specific instances that with the adventure games, so these are sort of a narrative, the remnants of point and click adventure games. I had this prototype and in Nuremberg, and I almost didn't show it to him because Cosmos also makes the exit games, and I thought, oh, this is too, it's a clash, and it's the kind of thing we do when you try and think about what the publisher is doing. You don't want to run against their products, but it's interesting because Wolfgang has this very open thing. He's like, just show me the game, and it was the best pitch. That he immediately called over his colleague who was in charge of the exit series. He said, have a look at this. They were like, oh, this could be an amazing follow-up to this. It really, it fits. And that game was signed in like 2 weeks, and it was probably the quickest to market from, it was about a year or maybe even less. So I think that kind of building a relationship of trust and respect, it can be really positive on both sides, and not just for the professional side. Personally, it's always a very enjoyable meeting when you feel like you can just be yourself, you can show your games, you'll get good feedback, but it's a great way to work if possible.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And, let's continue that conversation. Someone that I enjoy pitching to and can talk into this is Sarah. I've had lots of experience getting to pitch different games. And could you talk about, this one's a biggie, but like, what's important to include in a pitch? What are some of the things that you're listening for when people are pitching to you?
So the big thing is a really concise overview of what your game is. So being able to explain the game in a minute or a minute and a half that I can understand what it is. I don't need detail at that point. I need a quick overview, knowing where it could fit in my line. If you've looked at my website or done any sort of research, either in my line or on shelf, where it would fit is really nice to have. And having a way to show me the game. If it's a video, if it's a sell sheet, if it's in this day and age tabletop simulator because it's all online, a print and play, some way to show me how you do it and walk me through one round or one move or one section really easily is super important for me to understand how to play and how it could fit for us.
That's a great example. I know firsthand because I've gotten to sit in and kind of be a wing person to some pitches with Isaac, and I think he's phenomenal at pitching. So don't feel bad to brag a little, but this is, and I'm going to put a few of you on this, but I want to hear like what makes you good at pitching. What is like some of your secret sauce? How do you think you do well? What do you do in a pitch that you have some strengths in?
I wish I had known that because I would have invited my mother to be on. I think about pitching as trying to tell two stories. And the first story is, how is the game going to delight a player? So it's not really rules and it's not really what the game is about, but it's how is the player going to experience the game and have an awesome time or have a memorable moment? What does it do for the player that delights them? And then the second story is, and how does that game delight the publisher? So what Sarah was just saying about fit is something I want to be able to speak to. And sometimes I'm able to speak to it directly in the sense that, oh, this fits into a thematic world that you own, or this clearly speaks to an audience that you know how to sell to. Sometimes it's maybe a little bit different or broader than that. Maybe it's an opportunity. Maybe it's, I've got a game that really belongs with an IP. It's an IP that maybe you don't have, but fits the model of other IPs that you do. Maybe that works. Sometimes it looks like there's a hole to me in your lineup, and respectfully, I don't know if that's where you're going, but I think this could fill it. If you're looking to fill it, I have an answer for you. Yep. And so trying to explain how the game delights the player, then how it delights the publisher is sort of the blueprint I use.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. For Tessa, do you want to share a little bit? You know, what strengths do you think you bring when you're pitching?
So for me, I feel like my one goal is to get the publisher to want to sit down and play a game with me. That's my only goal. So I want to be as concise as possible and figure out like what is the key phrase that gets people's eyes to light up about the game, because different people are going to find different values in your game. But if you find out what's marketable about your game, whether it is the way that you frame the theme or whether it's a unique mechanic, being able to like put that in the forefront, like your first couple of sentences, and get them intrigued enough to say, you know what, I will sit down and learn the rules to this game, and then judge for myself the full product. That's my goal.
Absolutely. So we're hearing some examples of what we need to include, what we need to do well. Sometimes we have probably some experiences where we didn't do that so well. So what are some things that we shouldn't be doing, or that you've seen other people doing? What are some warnings or flags, or where you've kind of gotten off the path, you are out of rhythm? And Erica, do you want to share maybe an example you've done or you've seen?
Sure. I'm just going to say in general, don't go after publishers after hours, for the love of God. That's just something I see way more of than I think I should. If they've agreed to that time meeting, great. If they're having a drink somewhere or they're talking to friends or whatever it is, please don't put your game in front of them. That's just like a friendly warning to people in general, because I don't think you're going to make the relationships we've been talking about by doing that. I think there's people who think that's what they have to do. I don't think that's going to get you very far in the long run. I really don't. But again, everyone's got their own style. So yeah, what is it? I mean, the one thing I think that I've grown in that I think is something that you have to pay attention to, because there's so much in this industry, especially the hobby side, where it's learn as you go. Because there is no book for this. There is no pathway for this. Everybody comes at it from a totally different angle. And so one of the biggest things I really had to learn in my pitch, because you start off, rehearsing, figure out what you want to narrow it down to. And it's great to have that precision. But then there's can you read the room and adjust? So I think at first, one of the big pitfalls is I'm going to almost like have this script in front of me and I'm going to say exactly this. And you're losing the ability to adjust as you go, to engage or even just gauge in general what is going on across the table from you. And so rather than having the exact same pitch for every single person, right, the same way you wouldn't maybe send out the exact same resume to every single person or whatever it is, you haven't really engaged the person across from you yet, right? And so just kind of understanding that if you start to notice that this is what they're really focusing on, we'll highlight where that could go next, even if you haven't even thought of it for yourself. It's amazing how much kind of on the fly, almost improv happens, the better you get at it, because you can say, oh, I can see you're looking for this in this game. I can tell you how to put that in right now. Oh, I can see you looking for this in this game. Let me explain to you how this is a whole system. But you don't have that to start. Okay. Absolutely. And don't expect to have it. And so, especially if you get a chance, I will just say, go try to sit in on pitches with other people that have done it a lot. It is such a steep learning curve, and it's very different when you watch the actual behavior of other people, right? Because it's easy to identify what not to do to a degree. It's way harder to identify what to do. And most of them are learning experiences to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had the pleasure of being on both sides, and it is a lot of learning opportunity when you get to watch someone else pitch. You can pick up some good habits, but then there's also some things that are tragically not the best process. I'm sure, Sarah, you've seen a wide variety. Any warnings, from being on the other side that you would give to, people pitching?
Yeah, Erica's advice was actually fantastic. To be able to read the room and adjust, that is the best way to be able to pitch. The other thing I'll say is don't talk about all of the problems your game has. If you have problems or you've play tested problems out, do not bring them up when you're pitching. At least to start, when we're kind of starting the process. Later down the road, if we need to fix something, that's fine. But yeah, definitely don't start talking negatively about your concept.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, sometimes we get tunnel vision. I have one quick story to share, and then we'll jump topic. But I want to jump in here because I have a funny moment. My very first game that I was pitching was a game called The Walled City, and I wanted to have an extra player in my pitch, and so I jokingly call this like my wingman. And one time, especially early on, I did not have the discernment of choosing that person wisely. So I just found someone and said, jump in, didn't lay any expectations. And when they were in the pitch, they continued to offer suggestions on how the game could be better because they are a designer. I will even call him out because he thinks it's hilarious. But Gord, the designer of Santorini, he's a very excellent mind about like making games that are elegant. And so the whole pitch, he was like making suggestions of things to cut out of the game while I'm pitching, and I can say the pitch did not go very well because, like Sarah said, all the blemishes were very pointed out, and so that's not necessarily your goal right off the bat while you're trying to pitch. So, but let's keep the conversation going. Let's point to now. It already kind of came up, but let's focus on it. Isaac talked about how to get meetings and how that's changing. Curious, Matthew, could you talk a little bit about how it was, how things are going, how things are changing? How can people get meetings with these different publishers?
I feel like I'm the sort of am I the dinosaur in the room? Remember how it was in the old days? When I would send a pigeon carrying my letter to a publisher or something. No, it is interesting because actually the industry has changed, and as we talk about with relationships. It means I do things still maybe in the old way and I can kind of get away with it. So it's a bit unfair. But I like to think that, firstly, always check a publisher's website or social media. There are a lot of good also aggregating tools now. The Cardboard Edison, for example, has a very good database of publishers. Like that's your first point of contact to even work out what publishers are looking for submissions. And another good way is to look at which publishers are going to shows that you're hoping to go to a convention and pitch in person. And then I would say, sending an email to, especially if there is a listed contact next to people who are looking for submission, that's a good sign that your email is at least welcome, and that's a good place to send that email to the person who's looking for it, which can be tricky. It's not every publisher's website is fantastic. Sometimes definitely ask other designers who are more experienced. Maybe they know a contact who'd be happy. There are often a lot of people who are very happy to be contacted, but you can't find their email address. So just feel free to use your contacts, talk to people, and then send a short email, which is much more about setting up a meeting rather than pitching. I think that's interesting about Erica talking about pitching out of hours. I think there's also a point about it is really about building relationships. I always think that sometimes a better success from a pitch is that you've ended up with that relationship in a better place, more so than you've signed a game. Because realistically, in the long run, you'll benefit much more from a good relationship. So in the same way as you don't want to approach a publisher after hours, you also don't want to pitch somebody unsolicited via email. So, that first email should really be just, hi, introduce who you are. I'm a game designer. I found your details from X or maybe from this contact. I have a game that I would like to pitch to you. Is that okay? Is there, what mode do you accept submissions? Or if they're going to be a convention, I know there's a convention, would I be able to schedule a meeting with you? So, being polite, brief, giving them the salient information that you're not a completely random person. That means you respect their time. Then they choose how to go from that. And doing that also in a timely fashion. So especially for conventions, things are busier and busier than ever. A lot of publishers are really welcome to take pitches from people they don't know. But if you email them 1 week beforehand, then they're not being rude. They just don't have time. So, you're really looking sort of 4 to 6 weeks, I would say, before a convention, at the minimum, to get in contact with a publisher, to meet with them. So yeah, I guess that's the sort of olden school way that I would say that you'd look into meeting with publishers.
I love it. I have embraced saying that I am a Luddite. I have not embraced technology, and yet there is a new wave of doing things, and one of the great perks of this last while we've gone through some real tragic times is that we've been able to embrace some technology and found some ways to use technology to connect with different people and show our games in new ways. So, Erica, why don't you jump into a little bit of, because I know you worked on and kind of learned some of the skills that go into some of the stuff, and how does that affect pitching specifically? Like, how do you see people utilizing technology for pitching?
Yeah, there's definitely some pros and cons that came out of it. I was just going to piggyback really just quickly for Matt's. If you're getting anything out of this, it all comes down to relationships. And one of the best things you can do is just show what you're capable of. You know, it's kind of like, I guess it's like pseudo like dating. It's like, don't, you know, if the person doesn't even, you haven't even introduced yourself, you can't ask them on the date yet, right? It's like, they don't even know who you are. Don't throw your game in their face. So I'll just say that. And then the idea is show what you're able to do. Like, show your variety, show your skills, because they will come back to you over and over again. As Matt and Isaac were referring to, is that you'll have no problem getting those meetings, but you will have to spend the time proving yourself first. And I don't think that's changed from the past to now. No matter what, actually, I feel like you have to prove yourself more now, but we'll maybe explain that as we go into some of the maybe not so great trends I'm kind of noticing. But one of the big things that from this year has definitely been things like Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia, like the idea of digitizing your game. There are some fantastic things that have come out of this. First off, you have a portable prototype. Oh my God, does that make life easy? This is something you can share as a workshop. This is something that you can play online with people. There are so many things that this bypasses that just makes life easier. You now have something that you can actually record for, we're going to talk about this shortly, sizzle reels. Well, guess what? You have a digitized version of your game. Do you know how easy it is to stage all those shots you wanted, record them, and now have a video that took you a fraction of the time that it took you offline? So there are huge advantages to this. Giant pitfall. And we're going to see a lot of fallout from this one, I think, as we keep going. UX. We now have all these games that have never been played in person, not technically in any real way. I actually have this issue with a current game I'm pitching where there's a lot of interest, but it's funny how a lot of the feedback comes down to UX. Now, whether or not that is my job is a whole other conversation, but the idea is that this was designed online. Tangible products, the actual ability to use it functionally in front of you is a very different concept. And that's not something that a lot of games in the last 2 years, basically, are going to have a lot of opportunities at. So the big pitfall here is it is designed in a space it will not remain in. You are going to have some major issues with translation. But again, where does that fall? Is it graphic design? Is it development? Is it usability, or just the user experience? These are a lot of different jobs we're now referring to. So this is another thing that's slowly starting to come out of this is, okay, but now as a designer, you need to be able to do all of this stuff. Go. Oh, by the way, you have to teach yourself too.
Absolutely. There's a lot to it. There's, some dinosaurs like me and Matthew are skipping those steps, and there's advantages as well. So the nice thing is we're all, using our unique ways to try to communicate and get our games known and connect them, find those marriages of the right publisher and the right game together. And I think one of the old school ways that, some people believe and some don't. I'm, again, maybe a little bit of a dinosaur on this one. But I'm going to pass it to Isaac because I think I know his answer on this one too. And then maybe follow up from Isaac, we'll go to Fortessa. But let's talk a little bit about sell sheets. What's our opinion on sell sheets? What needs to be included on a sell sheet? All that kind of stuff. So, Isaac, start us off.
I feel like I'm in such a safe space because there's so many folks who are like,
sell sheets. Maybe sell sheets.
Right, sizzle reel, yes. Sell sheet, no. I think that's right. So the sell sheet is an answer to a problem that you don't want to have, which is, are you like a weird stalkerish person who has a terrible game and is going to waste a publisher's time? That's sort of the gate that publishers put up to say, look, I cannot talk to every single person who thinks they have a game. Can you do something to show me that you can pitch this, and also to show me in advance a little bit if this game is even worth me sitting down, because maybe it's a bad fit. How about a sell sheet, right? And this kind of emerged, it bubbled up through the speed dating stuff, which I was very involved with early on, and so I sort of saw this as, like, it became like an admissions test. And it's a good exercise to figure out how on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper you're going to say something compelling about your game. That's a great exercise. It's good to know that publishers do need to look at your components, and they do want to know what your title and sort of your image for the game is. It's a way to express what the tone of the game is, who the audience might be. So those are good things, and I might tell you as a marketing exercise to create a sell sheet so that you understand your game better. But in terms of presenting yourself to a publisher, in a world where we have sizzle reels, where we have PowerPoints, where we have such a richer way to express what this game is and how it could be attractive and how it could be a good fit, you are putting yourself in a really limited position by using a sell sheet. And I'll say this as someone who is not a graphic designer, there are a lot of graphic designers in the industry who are also game designers. They're gonna make a better sheet than you. They're just gonna make a better sheet. So you need to lean into your strengths. This is still a sales process. And if you've got a great game that you believe in, give it its best shot by making it the best kind of marketing effort that you can make, not the sheet that everyone told you to fill out.
Love it, love it. But maybe there's another side to this coin. I'm hoping we might hear some pros of what a sell sheet can do. We did even hear some there, but for Tessa, why don't you share a little bit about your opinion or the other side of sell sheets?
Yeah. So I think that sell sheets are super, super useful. And the reason I like to equate them as being the resume for your game. One, because very similar to a resume, you will have to fill it out, and a lot of people will require them for you. Now, whether they use them or not, that's up to them. I can definitely say I've seen them like take the sell sheets, never heard about, like, oh my gosh, I saw your sell sheets, great. But the point is that a lot of the game contests that I entered, a lot of the different pitching events that I entered, they required a sell sheet. And then much to what Isaac was saying, as an exercise, it's very, very helpful because as a game designer, it helped me reframe how I was thinking about my game. Like, you spend a couple of years working on this game and you kind of hone in on, this is my baby and this is precious to me and I love it and you should love it. But whenever you have to make a sell sheet, you have to kind of take a step back and look at your game as a product, and you have to figure out component wise, like what your game is doing. You have to figure out how to highlight it and how to talk about it without talking too much about it and scaring people off. You have to figure out like what picture makes your game look the best. And I think that's a very, very helpful exercise, especially when it comes to pitching, because it's so very personal to you. But having to take that step back and list those things at least gives it a little bit of distance. So it's more of a way to kind of change your perspective and make the pitching process easier for you. And also, if you are participating in these things that help you put yourself out there, such as these game contests and pitching events, then you're definitely going to need the sell sheet. There are definitely people who are more excelled at graphic design who can make these very beautiful sheets, but that still doesn't mean that you can't make a good sheet because you just need it to be clean. The same way you can make a good resume, you can make a good sell sheet. You just need to organize it, not have yellow text on a white background, not have text on top of an image, things that are considered eyesores. And, as long as it's clean, easy to read, then you're good to go.
Love it. Love it. I will confess, I've been on both sides of this argument, and I really appreciate that, we can respectfully disagree. And the nice thing is you get to, if you're out there pitching, you decide which way you want to go. One little trick that I'll mention that I have done a few times, a lot better when my co-designer helps me with this because I am not a graphically inclined individual. But one of the things that I love to do is to leave a component with the publisher when I'm pitching, even just a card or a tile or something, because sell sheets, one of the benefits too is it helps when a publisher sees so many games to like have something help trigger, what was that game? How am I going to remember this after, especially if it's at a convention, seeing so many things? I know like I've got to do inventor relations a few times, and as much as I remembered a game was good, it was really helpful sometimes to even just have that quick sell sheet to be able to go like, yeah, what was the components? What was probably the MSRP on that one? Or little details like that. So that can be really helpful as just at least a tangible takeaway amongst, seeing so many games. So that is definitely some of the positives of having a sell sheet or other ways, creative ways to do that. We mentioned one of the creative ways is sizzle reels. This is becoming a growing need and demand. And this was a new term to me just a few years ago. So Sarah, I'll put you on the spot. You mind kind of explaining like what is a sizzle reel and what makes a good sizzle reel?
So sizzle reels, I find are super important. It is a video that explains your game. Hopefully it's not 10 minutes long. So if you can make it concise, do a quick overview of your game, talk about the key actions, why I'm playing it, how I win. I don't care about MSRP in the sizzle reel. I just care about the game itself. And for me, I work for a global company. We have offices all around the world. And for me to show teams that are working on a different brand in a different country, the sizzle reel is super helpful for me to get the point across of the game without going, it's like this board and you move and you're flipping tiles. To have that video is incredibly helpful for me.
Awesome. Erica, do you have anything to add to the need and benefits of a sizzle reel?
Well, I was going to say, and hopefully anyone who is listening to the sell sheet, if you notice, as much as the three people on the bottom don't necessarily use them, we're not saying that they're not a big helpful part of the process, because effectively, if you just listened, what you heard was your sell sheet is effectively the flyer you leave behind to remind them about why they might be interested in this, right? Very least maybe get them to remember your name, but everybody identified it is basically pulled out your elevator pitch. Mm-hmm. Right. And so just doing it, even if you don't necessarily do it to give to anything, that is just at least how to, basically we would call it like either a creative brief or a product brief, kind of like from the more standardized side, right? But it's a more informal version of that. So they're great to have at least from that side point. But again, it'll depend on your usages. They are, good for particularly contests, right? As a way to because you have all these people to compare against. What's really kind of cool about a sizzle reel is if a sell sheet is your flyer, a sizzle reel is your commercial. Everything you're saying on a sell sheet that might be like, I think I get this. I think I know what they're referring to. I kind of can see what they're saying. All those things you would guess on, no longer are guesses because it's in the reel, right? Because when you say it in words, there's a very big difference when you're also saying it through pictures. Because this is part of, I'm an elementary school teacher on top of this, right? So if I'm going to explain getting the message across for something, if I was going to talk at them, there's maybe 7 of my kids that are going to actually remember anything I said, right? If I add a visual to that, I'm now up to let's say 15 of the 20 kids. If I have a visual and they see it and they can touch something, I'm now at everybody. And so what we're not thinking about is how many people you're kind of cutting off along the way, right? By these different examples. Now, will I say this is a huge jump in abilities? Yes. Is that fair? No. And so that's already going to be a huge barrier, right? To anyone trying to get into this. Is it going to sell a lot easier? Is it a lot easier, as Sarah was saying? Can they send that video to France, Germany, and everyone else who's making these decisions? Yes. And if you're going to pitch anyone mass, now this is actually probably better mass, I would say advice, because hobby doesn't necessarily have to go this far, but in mass, they have to keep getting the approval up the line, and that video is going to speed that up like crazy. Now, does mass need this? Not necessarily, but if you want to get noticed and, there's no cons to get noticed at right now, that might be your way of getting noticed.
Absolutely. For Tessa, do you want to add to this, and then we'll jump into another topic?
Yeah, similar to what Eric was saying, it takes a certain skill set to make a very good sizzle reel, but similar to the sell sheet, you can still do it even with a limited skill set. There are certain things you really want to pay attention to, such as the audio. A lot of times it can be easy. Maybe you're distracted and you look away or whatever. When you're teaching, like you want to make sure you're focusing on whatever your audio source is, even if it's not like an official microphone. You want to make sure you're well lit, even if it's like just a little lamp that you put next to your camera. And you want to make sure that you are engaging because, again, people learn in different ways. And you just sitting there kind of talking about your game from like a faraway shot is not very engaging. Or you like kind of just talking where you have your kids and your dog and, you know, just crossing over and all this background noise that's not very engaging, that's distracting. But if you are focused and you're showing your face while you move the things and then you show the board, or another trick that I really like is showing the board and like doing a voiceover. So you don't even have to record the same, both of them at the same time. And that way you can write a script and record that and re-record that as much as you need. And then you just film footage that matches up with whatever your script is and edit it that way. So that's a lot less trickier timing and can help you kind of match things up. But that's my advice, especially if you're not familiar with the video editing thing. It's something you can definitely do, but keeping it minimal is best. Don't add music overlaid on top of things. You know, keep your background noise minimal and you'll be fine.
Yeah, great advice.
Can I just add one thing? The nice thing is there's plenty of free stuff for this. Please do not pay money. Yeah. There's free audio software. Go to get Audacity. There's free editing software. There's free music you can use. There's like record yourself. Exactly what Protesta said. Please record the video separate, record your audio separate, smash them together. If you want to add music, go nuts. Just consider equalization. But at the same time, like all of it is free. Yeah. Okay. Please don't be dumping more money here because I think a lot of people, the skill is already enough of a barrier. Don't be worrying about the money on top of it. Okay. Just focus on the skill. There's tons of free stuff.
Absolutely. So changing gears a little bit, we've already talked a little bit, but I'm going to put you each on the spot. People don't know this, but I'm creating a little game moment here. I'm going to pick one of you. Each of our panelists will answer this question, hopefully. But I'm going to ask, like, what is a fave or a good convention that you recommend when conventions come back? Maybe we're just more looking forward to them. I know I am. But maybe from the past and what you'd recommend in the future as a convention that you think is great for pitching, you know, a great opportunity for building those relationships, getting in front of decision makers. You know, what do you think is a good place to invest in going if you can? It's not possible for everyone. There's some great online opportunities as well. But if you were to pick one, what would be the one that you'd recommend? And I'm going to put Sarah on the spot first. So you have total freedom. You can't go wrong. But everyone else on the panelists, they're going to be listening in because they can't answer the same as someone else. So,
and I have two.
So. Oh, yes. Even better. I love it. Let's make it harder.
So for me, if you're in Europe, Mojo Nation is fantastic because they send out a list of who is interested in what. We have to provide a wish list, and then they match us based on our stuff. And in the US, it's ShyTag, which has a new inventor and established inventor track, which is really nice. And I feel like both of those, because they're multiple days, I have more time to sit and play a game with you versus Toy Fair feels very rushed to me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Those are amazing recommendations. Mojo Nation, I had my first time doing actually their digital virtual con, and even that was incredible. That is the only convention I can say that of because I'm not a fan of digital. I already mentioned I'm a Luddite, but that was an incredible experience. Mojo Nation was really organized. They put you in front of like a real wide variety, and they had briefs and like what publishers were looking for and all that information gathered and helped organize that. And then I could never sing Mary Cousins' praises enough. She is amazing. If you don't know who Mary Cousin is, look into ShyTag, now rebranded to People of Play, and you just need to get to know Mary. Mary is a champion for inventors and loves finding ways, especially if you know some young inventors. She does some really great stuff, inspiring and providing space and lifting people up, especially of the younger age, to get their game ideas out there in the world. So thank you, Sarah, for starting things off nice and hard. I'm going to put Erica up next. What's your answer for this? I am going to limit everyone else to one.
Yeah, this
No,
is
I
what
like it.
if I was going to okay, I'm going to say what I would recommend to other people. Because funny enough, I don't actually attend this con that often, but it's only because I can't. So most people don't understand that publishers want to kind of have their year booked in, like what they're going to be, working on, what they're going to be picking up. They kind of want that done before the summer hits. Like they really want to be kind of done that before June. So if you are able to get to somewhere, let's say like an Origins, not only are you going to have access to a lot of the publishers that have a bit more free time than, let's say, like a Gen Con, which is like a madhouse. It's like the hobby version of what we were just talking about for New York Toy Fair. You will actually get time with those publishers. You might get a chance to actually just pick up a thing on the spot, but you also have a much better chance of getting things signed if they see what they like, because there's more of a drive in that first half of the year to get that out of the way. And so if you're new to this and you can't afford a lot of cons, I might actually suggest you focus on the first part of the year.
Awesome. For Tessa, you're up next. What do you recommend?
Yeah, so mine's is going to be maybe a little bit smaller, but I think coming from the perspective of someone who is introverted and not in love with large crowds, I really like to recommend Metatopia, because that for me felt like a very intimate venue. And that was the convention where I was able to sit down at a table with the most publishers and like notable game designers who could like word of mouth recommend me to other people. And I sat down at the table with so many different new people and made so many connections there, which is like important, even if I didn't get anything signed there, which I did. That helped me later on in other conventions. So if you are maybe not as big of a fan of large scale conventions, I would go to Metatopia, because it is much more curated, both in how the time is used with playtesting and the panels, as well as just like the amount of people there and how you get to network and connect with people.
Amazing. All right, now we have next on us Matthew, and he has promised to make this hard for Isaac. So let's hear it.
No, I don't think I'm going to make it too hard. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit different for this panel because I'm not based in North America, so it's sort of a different plethora of things. And I would say, for me, it would probably be Nuremberg, which is late January, early February in Nuremberg. I mean, it's similar to some of the other panelists sort of talking about that because it's a trade fair. Publishers generally have a lot more time. You can have longer meetings. It's just quieter. It's very different being a business kind of, people walking around in suits don't tend to be shouting or running or,
Yeah.
And you get a really wide range of people being there, from like the very big sort of mass companies and toy companies to really the hobby industry as well, because a lot of the smaller hobby publishers will be there. Even if they don't have a booth, they'll usually have a representative there and you can set up a meeting. So I think in terms of that, it's just a bit more relaxed. And the only other small thing is that because some of the bigger publishers have probably a big presence there, you get some nice perks sometimes. I always remember Ravensburger. Ravensburger comes in with a little menu and you can like order what you would like, some hors d'oeuvres and a cup of tea or wine or something. It's true. There is a bit, which it's a nice little thing. But anyway, it's slightly tongue in cheek. But yeah, you get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of 2 days in Nuremberg or even 1 day. You can meet with the people you need to in a relaxed way, and everyone's just less stressed. I guess we haven't really talked about again with the relationship thing, is that there's sort of an uncontrollable part of this whole process that it depends how you're feeling on the day, how the person you're meeting with is feeling on the day. That all those things you can't control, and we're just human. And sometimes it's trying to put yourself in the best position that you can have the best meeting. It doesn't always happen, but choosing the right convention can also influence that.
Absolutely. And it is totally real that they have like these fancy kitchens and different things like that. And I have to jump in for a moment just to share my favorite Nuremberg story, and how I met Goliath was actually, I was at Nuremberg, and through Mary Cousins, I was already singing her praises. So Mary and I had hung out at a beer mat flipping event where, for anyone who doesn't know, a coaster is a beer mat, and so you take stacks of them and you try to flip them up and catch them in the air. And we were hanging out at that, and just through relationship and hanging out and chatting, it came out that she said, "Oh, you need to meet with Goliath," because I had never met with that company before, and so the next morning I got a text saying, "Go to this booth," and I got lost because I had no experience going into the jumbo land of like these big publishers that have like their own like bouncers and private kitchens and all this kind of stuff. So I totally got lost trying to find which, if you saw how big it is, it's actually almost hard to not find them. But that was my first experience. And the other kitchen story that I got to share is that at Essen, one time I showed up for a meeting and all the nice little tables in the Asmodee area were taken and I had to wait. So they shoved me into their little kitchen to wait. And I just like hung out with the kitchen staff. It was super weird, but super funny to see like behind the scenes. So that's my stall to give Isaac a little bit of time because he's run out of some of his options. Isaac, do you want to share with us your fave or one good recommendation of a con?
Yeah, I'm going to break the rules and go with two as well, but I feel
All right.
like I'm
You're
allowed.
last. You get to.
There are really two that it's very hard to do both, but they're both really, really good. And so it may just come down to what's more convenient or which publishers are showing at either one. But it's all about relationships. And two great cons for building relationships at the right time of year are Board Game Geek Con and PAX Unplugged. Board Game Geek Con is small. It can be hard to get tickets to. There's a lot of demand, so you may not be able to go each year and experience it. But if you do get the opportunity, for most publishers, it's the last convention they're doing of the year, and then going into holidays. So it happens right before U.S. Thanksgiving in early November, typically, early to mid. And so publishers are much more relaxed. It's not a retail con. There's not heavy sales. For many of the publishers, it's almost their half con, half vacation, and they will take the time. They'll play the games. It's a really, really great opportunity to learn more about who they are, what they're looking for, develop personal relationships. PAX Unplugged is similar. It's actually a shorter con. It's only 3 days, and it tends to be in late November, early December. But it's similarly, again, that kind of last con of the year. It has a much, much, much bigger publisher attendance. And even though it is a retail con, it doesn't have the crush of a Gen Con. Even the layout is just wider and more natural. And I've just found publishers are very amenable to taking pitches. They tend to be in a pretty good mood. And again, you get to build the relationship because you're not doing a 20-minute meeting where you're trying to get through 5 games. So both PAX Unplugged and BGG Con, end of the year cons, use that opportunity, make friends during the holiday season, and get your game seen in the best light.
Awesome advice. And then I'm going to cheat and add one more because it's the best low-hanging fruit. But I highly recommend Unpub, as we're part of Nunpub. And I'm really excited because next year in May 19th to 22 in 2022, it's going to be back in person. The special guest is Elizabeth Hargrave, who's awesome and is going to give a really great keynote. I know it because I've heard that talk. Well, I'm sure it's a new talk, but I've heard her speak a few times before and have learned so much. She's a phenomenal designer. So definitely keep in mind Unpub 2022. It's in May. It's in Baltimore at the Delta Hotel Hunt Valley. I've never been to that location, but I have been when they had it in downtown Baltimore, and it was amazing. Great opportunity, A, to test your games, and B, to get them in front of publishers. So a friendly plug there. While we're in the plug mode, time has disappeared so quickly, so I'm going to pass it around to each of our panelists, and they're going to have to self-promote a little bit. This isn't, a pitch. You're not on the spot, but I do want you to share some of the fun stuff that you have going on, and also please share your social media. I'm confident in saying each of these people would be happy to interact with you after this. If you have any more questions, comments, anything like that, please reach out and interact with any one of us. For Tessa, can you start us off?
Sure. So you can find me very easily at for Tessa. just at my name on Twitter or Instagram or anywhere really in the world. So you can find me there. My Kickstarter is live and it launched this Monday. Just funded today. Huzzah. So you can check that out at bookofvillainy.com and it'll route you straight to the Kickstarter. And yeah, I'm on BGG. So if you find Fortessa Elise, that's me because I'm the only Fortessa. Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Sarah.
I'm pretty easy to find. It's Sarah Fure everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. And Daryl knows Facebook is sometimes the best way to reach me. We are looking for pitches for finishing up 22, starting on 23 in all categories: light strategy, family, party, kids, gateway games. We kind of have a wide variety, so feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. Isaac.
Hey, so you can find me on Twitter as Kind Fortress. You can email me, isaac@kindfortress.com. And you can buy my new game, Waddle Downtown. It is on the shelf right over there, and it is from WizKids, and it is awesome. So please check it out, especially if you like penguins.
Woohoo! And everyone loves penguins.
Everyone loves
Erica, you're next.
Basically, if you look up Erica Buyuris, I am the only one, so you're going to find me on whatever platform. And yes, I'm very happy to help out people wherever I can. With that in mind, I'm actually going to do a few media plugs because I do a lot of things talking to new designers, old designers, basically anybody in the industry. So if you're kind of interested in these type of conversations or learning kind of these behind the scenes, me and Senfeng Lim and Jesse Wright do a live show every Wednesday called the Meeple Syrup Show. But we also have the Meeple Syrup Shop Talk page, which is about 1,000 people all in the hobby industry that'll probably know something about what you're talking about if you have any questions. I'm also one of the co-hosts for Ludology podcast, which is literally the study of game design. So both of those are great just resources for any type of information you might want about the industry, just because it really is a giant learning curve of find out what you can on your own. But in terms of just plugging something, Rat Queens is heading to Kickstarter. It's an awesome comic. Hopefully you'll think it's an awesome game. And then Scott Pilgrim Miniatures the World is actually getting its expansion reprint this summer. So there's going to be a whole bunch more available at game stores and comic book stores.
Awesome. And Matthew.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. I'm Wise Goldfish, all one word there. I also stream on Twitch, MT Dunstan. I do that weekly on Wednesdays, and I sort of chat about what it's the life of an independent game designer, which is all and sundry, and always happy to have sort of chill chats about that. And in terms of pitching, I have a few new games. One's called Spy Connection from Pegasus Spiel, so that hopefully is reaching North America. I know it's available in Europe, and hopefully that's coming soon. And I wish... There's a game literally launching in 3 weeks, but I can't talk about it because they haven't announced it yet, annoyingly. So anyway, if you find yourself in Target on the 1st of July, then look for a new small box game.
Awesome.
Anyway,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, if people are following you, Matthew, then they'll know because I'm sure you'll.
That's true.
You'll
That's
share,
true.
You'll share when it's possible. So I just want to again thank each of our panelists. Thank you so much for being part of this. Really appreciate each of you and the wisdom and experience that you have sharing with our viewers. And also, I just, if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can find me on social media, usually as Daryl M. Andrews. It looks like Daryl Mandrews on different, whatever social media you can find. Love talking about games and get to do this full time. So I'm very thankful to be able to work with people. I love collaborating and finding excuses to talk about games. So with that said, check out the other NunPub 3 content that is being offered this weekend. There's a lot of great stuff. I know Fortessa's got some more panels going on, and then also a shameless plug for the developer panel that will be happening tomorrow afternoon, where I'll be moderating with another wonderful 5 guests chatting about development and what is that role. So with that said, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, and keep making fun games.
Thanks, everyone.